All right, I'm going to start out reading. Again, I'm going to read to you because it's a chunk that we're going to read. We're going to read in Genesis 29, starting in verse 1, and we're going to read 13 verses. So you guys can put them up on the screen. If you'll move those for me while we read. So Jacob hurried on. Finally, arriving in the land of the east, he saw a well in the distance. 3 flocks of sheep and goats lay in an open field beside it, waiting to be watered. But a heavy stone covered the mouth of the well. It was the custom there to wait for all the flocks to arrive before removing the stone and watering the animals. Afterward, the stone would be placed back over the mouth of the well. Jacob went over to the shepherds and asked, "Where are you from, my friends?" "We're from Haran," they answered. "Do you know a man there named Laban, the grandson of Nahor?" he asked. "Yes, we do," they replied. "Is he doing well?" Jacob asked. "Yes, he's well. Look, here comes his daughter Rachel with the flock now." Jacob said, "Look, it's still broad daylight, too early to round up the animals. Why don't you water the sheep and goats so they can get back to the pasture?" "We can't water the animals until all the flocks have arrived," they replied. Then the shepherds moved the stone from the mouth of the well, and we water all the sheep and goats. Jacob was still talking with them when Rachel arrived with her father's flock, for she was a shepherd. And because Rachel was his cousin, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and because the sheep and goats belonged to his uncle Laban Jacob, Jacob went over to the well and moved the stone from its mouth and watered his uncle's flocks. Then Jacob kissed Rachel, and he wept aloud. And he explained to Rachel that he was her cousin on her father's side, the son of her aunt Rebekah. So Rachel quickly ran and told her father Laban. As soon as Laban heard that his nephew Jacob had arrived, he ran out to meet him. He embraced him and kissed him and brought him home. When Jacob had told him this story, Laban exclaimed, "You really are my own flesh and blood." So you can see where we're going with this, right? So we have been exploring the life of Jacob. We have, I think, pretty much established that if you thought you knew the story, you're like, oh, that is not the man I thought we were talking about. He's not what you expect when you talk about God's blessings flowing through somebody. Normally we say, well, not a person like that. Jacob, we've firmly established now, is not a spiritual giant, not a man of character, not a man of integrity. He was, in fact, pretty much the opposite of that. He was a self-focused, dishonest, deceitful man. And so here's another way I would say it. He was a guy who didn't play fair and was really good at not playing fair. He was clever, he was manipulative, he had no problem resorting to questionable tactics and dishonesty if that would advance his goals. And whatever happened to other people in the process, not his concern. His sole concern was what he wanted. That was his only agenda. Are you guys familiar with the show Survivor? Anybody? So the kind of the tagline is outwit, outplay, outlast. And so if you've ever seen that show, it kind of starts off with 16 players, and each episode someone is voted out of the tribe. Your goal is to be the last one, and you win $1 million. Not a bad deal. And all you have to do to win that $1 million is backstab and betray and lie and deceive, and that $1 million can be yours. And it's really like this human experiment, like what lengths will you go to win $1 million? And so it's actually full of drama and power plays and outright lies and subtle manipulation, constant suspicion, closely held secrets, and always doubt about who's on your side and who's not. And it all works on one basic principle: selfishness. If you take that out, there is no game left, because the whole thing is really an experiment in human selfishness. What are you willing to do to get ahead, to win $1 million? How far will you go? How many people will you betray in order to make that happen? It's about promoting yourself above everybody else. And Jacob would have been a wizard at this game. Like, he would have been the ruler in this game, because he was masterful at manipulating people. He's the kind of person, like, as we read the stories, like, why would you trust anything this guy says? And yet people fell for the things that he did. And he didn't care how it impacted others. He didn't care how it all played out. And so that's what makes this so shocking when you look at a guy like Jacob, like, wow, so this is one of the big three. This is one of the patriarchs through whom God's promises would flow. Unexpected. So as we've looked at the story, we're to the point where he's executed his schemes and it's all caught up to him. He has his last deception kind of sent his family into chaos. He now finds himself on the run on a 500-mile journey, trying to get away specifically from his brother because of the chaos, who has made a commitment to kill him. That's the chaos that they're in now. That's how much damage he did with his last scheme. And so his brother isn't just mad at him. His brother is like, I will kill you. And so he's running for his life, and he's on this long journey with his latest deception smoldering behind him. And so last week we saw in the middle of this, he has this really unique encounter with God. He encounters God in this dream, and the message of the dream dramatically envisioned the nearness of God to a man like Jacob, with everything smoldering in the background. He has this dream where God says, I'm with you. I'm always close. I know who you are. I know what you've done. I know how you deceived your brother. I know how you exploited your father. I know how you teamed up with your mother. I know who you are. I know how you got here. And here's the promise I'm making. I will be with you. Like, it almost sounds weird to say it, right? When you have the description of who he is, and then you say, and then God told him, I will be with you. And you're like, I don't think that's how that works. Right? Like, and what we looked at last week was just this crazy grace. Like, because if you're saying Jacob did something to deserve God's blessing, you look at the story and like, yeah, he does not deserve that blessing. And so it's in spite of him, not because of him, that God chooses to bless. God reaches out to this man who's done nothing to deserve it. And we talked about how it's this beautiful picture of the gospel. It's part of the big redemption story in Scripture. Here's a man who we can all agree, like, did not deserve that. And God says, but I choose to bless. That's the story of Jacob. So as we continue on today, we're going to pick up right after the dream. And so here's right after the dream. This is chapter 28. Jacob made a vow saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I'm taking and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear so that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house, and all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. So, like, we're looking at this and saying, okay, progress. Good. All right. So he's stepping in the right direction. So let me just point this out for you real quick. Did you happen to notice something a little off in his commitment here? It feels a little bit conditional, doesn't it? Like, here's what it is. If God will do all of this, then the Lord will be my God. So if he'll be with me, if he'll watch over me, if he'll provide me food and clothing, if he'll return me safely home, if God keeps all of that part of the bargain, you know what? Sure, you can be my God. Like it almost has this feeling that if God will be faithful, then God can count on Jacob. Right? Like kind of weird. And it's strange, but then you're like, yeah, that's Jacob. That sounds about like the commitment he'd make. But like to feel how weird this commitment is, let's state it this way. What if you did your marriage vows like that? Right? Like if I were to stand before my bride and say, I, Tim, take you, Jewel, to be my wife from this day forward in the presence of God and family and friends, I accept your solemn vow. Right? I'm not making a vow, I'm accepting yours. I accept your solemn vow to be my faithful partner in sickness and in health, in joy and sorrow, and you must promise to love me unconditionally, to forgive, not hold grudges, to support me in my goals, to honor me and respect me, to laugh with me and cry with me, to cherish me, as long as we both shall live. And then I will be your husband, and you can be my wife. Like, you see how that feels? Like, everybody be saying, run now. Like, don't even do this. And this is the kind of commitment Jacob makes to God. Like, as long as I think I'm going to get what I want out of this deal, sure, you can be my God. But it's like this totally me-first approach to commitment. It's a very conditional commitment. And again, consistent with who Jacob is, because he's all about Jacob. But let's time out here, as we often do, because we see something of human nature here, don't we? Some of our stories are those stories where we were disenchanted with God, and maybe for a period you stepped away, held God at arm's length, like he didn't keep up his end of the bargain, right? Conditional. Or how many have ever prayed a prayer, that conditional one, where you said, God, if you do whatever it is, then I will do or I won't do this, right? It's this conditional commitment. Like, you do, and then I will. But it's a deal we're making, right? And it starts with you doing, and then if you follow through on your part, then I do my part. Like, it's the kind of thing that many of us have said at different times when we're desperate enough. If you, God, do this, then I'll do this or not do that. But it's a conditional commitment. What's in it for me? Here's the amazing part in this, that somehow, sometimes, God humors us and says, okay, you know what? I'll meet you there. We'll start there. But he's not going to let us stay there. You know, we kind of approach like a self-centered toddler who doesn't know what else to do except me first. And God says, you know what? I love you, and I'm going to start with you right there sometimes. He does that, but he's not going to let us stay there. And Jacob will benefit from God's promises, but you're going to see as we follow the story, he's also going to be moved into a much more humble dependence on God, a less conditional commitment, one that's not quite self-focused like he begins. So when you get to chapter 29, It's near the end of his long journey. The goal has been to get to Haran and find his uncle Laban. He knows he's close. He knows he's in the region. Jacob arrives, and he arrives at this well, and he sees others arriving at the same time. And so Jacob asks the shepherds, "My brothers, where are you from?" "We're from Haran," they replied. "Really? Okay, interesting. I was hoping to get to Haran." He said to them, "Do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson?" "Yeah, we know him." "Interesting. Okay, this is where I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to find Nahor." And then Jacob said, "Well, do you know if he's doing well? How's he doing?" "Well, yeah," they said, "he's doing well. And here comes his daughter." "Really? His daughter right now, right here?" Okay. That could not have played out any better, right? Like, wow. He didn't have to do anything. He just shows up. He happens to arrive at this well as all of these flocks are waiting to be watered. And some of the shepherds just happen to know exactly who Laban is. And at that very same moment, his daughter just happens to be coming up with the sheep. And here's what I want you to notice is that God has lined everything up for Jacob. And here's what's different. Jacob is used to lining things up for himself, isn't he? Like, he doesn't wait for things to be lined up. He lines things up. So how good is this as a confirmation for Jacob? Like, he's received a promise from God. I'm going to be with you. And now, it's like this very first situation he sees. Okay, like this is good. Like, he couldn't have lined this up. He was walking into the unknown. He's only asking questions because that's all he can do right now. But God has lined this up. The manipulator, the one who makes circumstances bend to fit him, well, there was no way to bend these circumstances. So while he's a man that does what he has to do to line things up, here, he doesn't have any options to line it up, but God lines it up for him. No schemes, no deceit, and no manipulation required. Who knew it could work like that? When Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of his uncle Laban, and Laban's sheep, he went over and rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well and watered his uncle's sheep. So quickly, one of the things that's happening here. So because it's a shared well and a common well, they keep it covered so that debris and junk doesn't get in there. And then they wait till everybody comes so it's not uncovered for a long time. And then they water and then they cover it up again. It's a way of preserving the well. And so there's this large stone on top of it, and they're waiting for all of the flocks to arrive. And Jacob sees Rachel and finds out this is Laban's daughter. And he's like, you know what? I'll take care of this. Normally this is like probably a two-person job. Like, it's a pretty significant thing to move it. Almost like Jacob's like showing off, like, okay, that's a pretty woman. Let me do something here. You know, like, I got this. I got this. I'm going to move this. And so he moves it aside, and then we read this. And then Jacob kissed Rachel and began to weep aloud. And he told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and a son of Rebekah. And so she ran and told her father. So I want you to just see Jacob's emotion for a moment. Like, he has been on this long journey. And there's a lot that he's left behind, right? Trouble, regrets, burned bridges, like he's done some damage. And then he has this, and we'll put the quotes around it, this chance meeting that's just this incredible display of God's guidance, God's care, and once again, let's say God's grace. Like, not deserved, but here it is. Have you ever experienced those moments where it just felt like God moved something in your life and you didn't know how else to say it except that had to be God? Like, those are emotional moments. I don't know if you've ever had somebody share just a well-timed word of encouragement. Like where you come in with a heavy heart and somebody just says, hey, you've been on my heart and I prayed for you. Like it feels in the middle of your, whatever you're carrying, like, really? I mean, I've had it happen, I'm guessing you have too, where somebody writes a note of encouragement, even a pre-written card, and it's like, that is exactly where I am right now. Or somebody shares a verse and says, hey, I thought of you, and here's the verse that came to mind, and you're like, okay, how did you know? Because that's exactly where I am right now. Like, in so many ways, we get those little glimpses, and it does feel powerful, doesn't it? Like this tangible way that God says, I see you, and I care. It's inspiring. It bolsters our faith. And it's just this tangible and strong reminder that God sees and that he cares. We need that. Pause for a moment and let me just say, if and when it comes to your mind to write a note to somebody, to send a card, to offer a word of encouragement, do it. I mean, if it's not profound, who cares? You just sent a word of encouragement. But you don't know. I've been on the side where I sent a card or a text and somebody said, you had no idea. You're right, I didn't. It felt kind of like, I'll send a text. And then it turned out that God had more in mind. So when you're on the other side and God puts something on your heart, just follow it through. Even if you're not saying, I don't know that God put that on my heart. I just thought maybe I should send a text or a note. Do it. And let God do what he does with that. So here's Jacob. And he's used to lining things up, but here's a situation he couldn't line up, but God lines it up. And so this is kind of like a new day for Jacob. Like kind of a fresh start, a different way of doing things. So it seems like God's hand is all over this. This is not just a chance meeting. And here's what Jacob is going to start to see from this moment forward. He's going to see God's hand of blessing on him in multiple ways moving forward. And Jacob doesn't know it yet, but connecting with Uncle Laban is going to change his life forever. Yes, he's going to find a wife, but he's also going to run up against a pretty shrewd manipulator. And he is going to find himself on the other side of the deception, on the other side of manipulation. He's going to get to be in Esau's shoes, in Dad's shoes. He's going to get to see what it looks like from the other side. And he's going to discover quickly that Laban is fairly accomplished in manipulating things to his advantage, in tricking, deceiving, even lying. And so, like, part of us feels like, yep, you reap what you sow. Like, yeah, what goes around comes around. Like, we have all these phrases, like, basically you got what you deserved. And Jacob is about to feel what it's like to be on the other side. So he has been living so far, sowing seeds of manipulation and deception. And of course, he's reaped some of that. But now he's going to get to see what it looks like when somebody sows them into your world. So here's what we read. That Laban has two daughters. So look at this. He's got two daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And here's how it's described. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. How would you like to be described with your sister like this? Right? Like, it's kind of brutal, isn't it? And here's how I would paraphrase it. Leah probably was nice enough, but she was ordinary. Probably didn't have men lining up to meet her. Rachel, well, she was beautiful, and it jumped out at you right away, and so she stood out in the crowd and definitely had Jacob's attention. And so here's what we read. Jacob was in love with Rachel. And he told Laban, I'm going to work for you for 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel. Paraphrase, I'll take the pretty one. And so Laban said, I love Laban's response. He said, it's better that I give her to you than to some other man. Like, that's a resounding vote of confidence in it. I mean, I guess you're better than what we could do. So it could be worse. And so we read this, that Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but it seemed like only a few days because of his love for her. Like, this is sweet, right? What a great story. And so 7 years he's worked. He's ready to have his wife. And many of you know this story. He's been waiting. She's worth it, though. And so there's 7 years later, the wedding day is set. There's this big celebration that happens. And there's feasts and festivities, and everybody's involved. And in the evening, the bride would be escorted by her father to the groom's chambers, and they would spend their first night together. And so after days of feasting and celebrating, Laban escorts his daughter to Jacob's chambers just like they had agreed. Well, almost like they had agreed. That night, Laban didn't deliver his daughter Rachel. He delivered his older daughter, Leah. Not the one Jacob loved, not the one he agreed to marry. And so they spend the night together. And the passage doesn't tell us, but here's what you should assume. So just to be clear, this is me speaking into this. But you should assume that the whole celebration pointed to Jacob and Rachel. That the names on the banners, if there were banners, would be Jacob and Rachel. Toasts that were made would be about Jacob and Rachel. Like, everything would say this is about Jacob and Rachel. And if it didn't, guess who would be suspicious? Like, if it kept accidentally saying Leah and did that enough times, I think Jacob would be like, okay, hold up. And come the nighttime, he'd be watching like, okay, I'm going to make sure. And so here's what we know. Like, this had to be sold for him to fall for this, which is just messed up on so many levels, right? Like, wow, that is awful. And so then Leah is the one given to him that night. Stop and think about this. How brutal is this for Leah? Like, not the one he wants, but dad says, it'll be fine, go ahead, right? And so Jacob, here's what we read. Jacob woke up in the morning and it was Leah. I love the KJV. Behold, it was Leah. Wait, what? And there are so many questions here, right? Like, how does that go off without being noticed? And we're not given any details. Again, I'm going to speak. This is not your Bible, this is me. But we can probably assume darkness, a veil or a covering of some sort, probably some attempt to make Leah look more like Rachel. And you can possibly assume some degree of drinking and Jacob having some dulled senses. And so, regardless of how it all went down, Jacob was deceived, and in the morning, behold Leah. Right? And so he knows immediately what's happened. Like, this whole thing has been a setup. It's Laban, and Laban knew the agreement they had. Laban was the one that brought him his bride that night, and that was not his bride. And so, as you might imagine, Jacob's not a happy man. And I think we would all agree, right? And so he goes stomping out to find Laban. Laban! Where's Laban? And so Jacob said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Side note again. Like, can you even imagine what this does to Leah? Like Jacob waking up in the morning and discussing, what are you doing here? Like being angry and disappointed that you're the one that's there, stomping out to find your dad because it's you, not Rachel, because you're not the one he wanted. And her father heartlessly putting her in this situation. How awful is that? And you have to feel for her. Like today we use words like trauma. We talk about therapy. Like, here's a woman who's going to have some trauma. And actually, you're going to see as we move through the story that this would be the beginning of a long, hard road for Leah. And her nagging issue would be the desire to be loved and accepted would be an ongoing issue for her. And we can all kind of say, yeah, I can see why. That was a horrific situation. So back to Jacob. Jacob is fired up, and we all agree he's got good reason to be like so messed up, so wrong, so deceitful. Like they had an agreement. He worked for 7 years, and the agreement everybody knew was for Rachel, not Leah. Laban was well aware of this fact that Jacob loved Rachel, not Leah. So why would Laban do something like this? Who does things like this? Who does things like this? And so Jacob has a few legitimate questions. Our agreement was for Rachel, was it not? What have you done to me? But here's the burning question he has. Why have you deceived me? What kind of man are you? Right? Back up 2 chapters to chapter 27, when Jacob dressed up like his brother and lied to his father so he could get that blessing that was intended for Esau. And Isaac, when he realized what had happened, trembled. And he says this, your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing. Who does stuff like that? So now here's Jacob, the accomplished deceiver, the one who's made this his regular practice, and he's taking issue with Uncle Laban's lack of ethics, his lack of respect for an agreement, for Jacob as a person. We would throw in Leah as his daughter. His lack of concern for integrity or being honest and upright, and his uncaring attitude that I worked 7 years only for you to deceive me. So Jacob is angry, cannot believe what his uncle has done to him. Like, how could he? Why would he? And we all like see the irony, right? Oh, there you are on the other side of the table. The player just got played. The manipulator just got manipulated. Welcome to the con game from the other side. So Laban Laban explains his dilemma to Jacob. Like, this is not what you think. Let me just explain why I had to do this. I had no choice. I had to do this. Laban said, it's not our custom to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. What was I supposed to do? I mean, his hands were tied, right? What could he have done? Were there any other options? I mean, I guess there's that one window where you could have mentioned the cultural nuance 7 years ago, but why make a big deal about that now? What's done is done. And Laban says, tell you what, just to show you I'm not unreasonable, finish out the bridal week with Leah. We don't want Leah to be hurt in all of this, right? Let her have her celebration, and I will give you Rachel as well. Oh, and one more teeny tiny condition. I'm going to ask that you serve me for another 7 years since you got another daughter, right? Like, this is so messed up, isn't it? And, like, let's just be honest. If you're not sitting in church, you're like, somebody punch him in the mouth, right? Like, you've got to be kidding. Now, if we're sitting in church, we're like, we're going to pray for you, right? But, like this is just so destructive. So wrong on so many levels. But Jacob agrees to Laban's terms, even though they're so ridiculous and unfair. And maybe, just maybe, and we're not told this, but maybe he is grasping, so this is what it feels like to be on this side of the con job. Maybe he's looking back and understanding a little differently the chaos that he left behind him. Maybe he's growing. In verse 28, we read this. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. And look at this. And his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah. And he worked for 7 more years. So now he has 2 wives, sister wives. What could go wrong? And these 2 women would struggle for years. Feeling unloved would be a constant battle for Leah. It would result in a bitter, intense rivalry between these 2, and we'll get into that a little bit. And interestingly, it would result in some dissension of the children to be born to these 2 women. All because of how this played out. For all the mess, for all the deception, here's what we started out with, that God led Jacob to this place. That when he arrived at that well, there it's playing out. And this is where God brought him. When he happened on the well, when just happened to touch points with Laban's family, and then Rachel shows up like, okay, God has lined this up. And God has led him to this place, but it is not what he expected. It would be a place of blessing, and we'll see that, but it would also be a place of refining. Has anybody experienced a place in your life that is both blessing and refining? Anybody married? Right? Bless and refine. Like, that's how it works. When Jacob here's what I want you to see how things have come around. So back home, Jacob found ways to be in control, right? But in Haran, see, now he's in foreign territory. And God has him in a place where he's going to be stretched, tested, even have some points of injustice to say, that is so wrong. He is going to be placed in positions where he is not in control. And this is a place where Jacob would have to think about his life from a different perspective, right? He's always thought of it from one side of the table, but now he's thinking of it from the other. Prior to this, if you had asked Jacob what his strength would be, he might have said something like, I know how to handle people, and I know how to take control. Yeah, that'd be one way of putting it. Like for Jacob, he always found a way to come out on top. But that was back home. Now he's in Haran, and this is different. He's not on top. He negotiated a legitimate deal and then got conned through treachery and deceit. And so you can see, right? We've kind of hit like how ironic this is. But God has placed Jacob in a point where his one go-to move of self-reliance is tested, where it's not as useful. He's allowed events to unfold. He's placed Jacob on the other side of deception. And so now watch how things have played out here. Ready? So Jacob, back home, he deceived Esau and his father. So he deceived his family, right? Now, in Haran, he would be deceived by family. His father-in-law deceives him. Back home, he ignored the cultural principle of the rights of the firstborn, right? He tried to find a way around it. Here, in Haran, he is forced, even through deception, to honor the principle of firstborn rights. Oh, there that happened. Esau was forced to live with the results of Jacob's deception back home. And now Jacob in Haran is forced to live with the results of Laban's deception, just like he did to his brother, that couldn't be undone. Like his father said, that blessing's going to stand. Well, guess what? Now you have two wives, and that's going to stand. Finally, like the family chaos that inevitably followed back home from his deceitful schemes, now it's playing out on another side, isn't it? Family chaos from deceitful schemes. But again, big picture, God brought him to this place where he would be blessed and he would be refined, where godly character would be squeezed out of him, eked out of him, forced upon him, where he would, through adversity and challenge, find himself stretching and growing in ways that he never envisioned. Made me think of this verse in Romans chapter 5. We rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces, and watch the chain here, suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. And we're going to watch Jacob go through this. Currently, he's in the perseverance phase, but it'll keep moving. Let me just ask you as we get ready to come to the table, where is there a place in your life where this has played out for you, where you have suffered in some way. And that as a result of that suffering, you had to step into perseverance. So perseverance is find a way to keep going. Anybody? You've been in the place of suffering and you find a way. And then from perseverance, where you find a way to keep going, you arrive at character. We'll state character this way. You are not the same person you were on the other side of suffering. Specifically, you're a better person than you were on the other side of that suffering. So suffering leads to perseverance. Find a way. Perseverance to character. You're not going to be the same person. And then finally, character to hope. Because when you suffer and you find a way to keep going, and you find your character has changed so you're not the same person, then you find that God is present from the very beginning and all the way through, which is incredible hope, isn't it? That no suffering that touches your life is wasted. That God uses it to make you a different person, to make Jacob a different person. And while we can look at Jacob's story and say, that man needs to be a different person, the truth is, we can find lots of places where we'd have to say, yeah, I need to be a different person. Which brings us to the communion table, doesn't it? The place of grace, where we are reminded that Jesus died for my sins and yours. Or another way to put it would be the places where I need to be a better person. And he didn't wait for us to attain a certain level of maturity or growth. In fact, here's what the scripture says. While you were yet sinners, when you didn't give a flip, Christ died for you. And so as we come to the